Okay, today's date is February the 24th. It's 6:58 p.m. Spokane time. We're at the Washington State Patrol Post North in Spokane. I'm in an office with Investigator Snowden from the prosecutor's office and Anthony Young. Do you know why we're here?
Yeah.
Anthony?
Yeah.
Why are we here?
I'm just trying to clear up some stuff from the past, probably.
Yeah. What, we talked to some people here in Spokane and in the area here, and I guess the information they've got is that you're telling them that 23, 24 years ago, that the information that you testified to in the Lisa Buckley case was not accurate. What can you enlighten us a little bit on that?
Well, it was fabricated.
It was fabricated?
Mm-hmm.
By who?
By me and, mainly me. And Judy Stoner.
You and Judy Stoner? I'm going to set this over here so I can try to get your voice, okay? Explain to me what was going on, or what happened.
Rick was killed, obviously, by Billy, and he was pretty much got off on it for self-defense or whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole family was pretty upset. And, Judy, of course, being a part of the POMC, they met with the Buckleys, and Judy came to me, and she had a plan that kind of, she knew her kids, Alan and David, she knew they were going to kill him.
Judy knew who was going to kill him.
And Judy knew that there was somebody was going to kill David before it was all said and done, whether we had to blow something up or shoot him right in front of cops or whatever it was. Somebody was going to do something.
How did she know that? Gut feeling, or she just...
She knows her sin. She knows her kids. And it was talked about kind of amongst the ranks. You know, it was talked about amongst people in private. There were several things that were set kind of into motion, and Ferg fucked up, and got caught with a bunch of fucking bullshit. And
Who did?
Jim Ferguson.
Ferguson?
Yeah. He was supposed to handle blowing up an enclosure that had Billy in it at one point.
And this was all because... Why?
Because David was vindicated basically on the charges for shooting Pete and Fur and Rick.
David or Billy?
Billy. So David was there, but it was Billy actually done the shooting.
So after Billy got found not guilty on Rick, you guys came up with this plan?
Well, we came up with several plans. And the number one plan, I think, was obviously everybody wanted him dead. But I think Judy didn't want to lose another son. Judy came to me and asked me if I thought I could pull off lying to the police and to the judge in order to convict him of something that he didn't do. That was the only way that we could, I think she felt that they would be satisfied as far as, and they being the brothers, Dave, Rick, and Alan, and Don. Was to give him the only thing worse than death would be to fucking put him in prison for the rest of his life with a rape beef.
So when did Judy come to you?
I don't know exactly when Judy came to me, but I do know it was sometime after the botched attempt by Ferguson.
Explain the botched attempt by Ferguson.
Well, Jim, he was supposed to, because he knew who Billy's lawyer was. He knew that Billy was frequenting his lawyer's office during that first case. And he knew that he could.
In the shooting case I was talking about?
Yeah. Well, not necessarily, because Billy was wrapped up in a couple different cases there. If I remember correctly, the case that and there were witnesses that seemed like they were coming out of the woodwork on this or that. I happened to live geographically right in the same area as the Cedar Lake. And Billy wasn't very well liked amongst the ranks of y'all, Preble County officials. I don't really think none of the stoners were either, but at that point, the Buckleys were involved, and the Buckleys had a few more strings they could pull than Judy, I think, did. Because they came in and eventually met, it was Mary Buckley that came in and met me with Judy. And they basically offered pretty much, because I had some bullshit warrants and stuff at the time. Just nothing, but I wanted to help with whatever I could. These are guys I grew up with, so I was looking to help out in any way I could.
Let's go back. You said you had some bullshit warrants at the time. You were what, about 17 when this happened? So you had juvenile court warrants?
Yeah.
You were on probation then, probably?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you said that Mary Buckley and Judy Stoner met with you? Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
Where did that occur at?
It occurred at a motel right there in Glenwood, right off of 35. I forget what the motel's name was.
Was it Sundown Motel at that time?
Maybe. This is a small motel right by the outdoor theater that was worked. We met there, and it was a pretty secretive meeting. I remember, Mary didn't want really anybody knowing. I met I met Judy down there. Judy basically had me tell my story to Mary, like I was telling it to a judge or telling it to a cop or whatever, as just to see. She wanted to see how convincing I could be.
Judy did or Mary did?
Mary wanted to see it, just to get a gauge of how well I was able to maintain my story. Is the way, I mean, that's my perception of the meeting, because she seemed a little reluctant at first, and then by the end of the meeting I pretty much had a believing that I could fucking pull it off. And
So Mary Buckley was in on the plan to fabricate the charges? Or what?
She believed that, honestly, she believed that we were targeting the right man. It wasn't until later on when I found out that it wasn't the right man. She, for some reason, believed in her heart that Billy did it. Physical evidence later on, when they allowed me access to look at pictures and things like that, evidence, is when I finally realized that it wasn't Billy that committed the crime.
When you said later
somebody else.
When you said later on, when they finally let you look at pictures and stuff, who's they?
Well, because of the nature of the deception, so to speak, there was only a few key people that were involved in conversations where we were talking about free will, with where everybody in the conversation knew that what the plan was. Frank Ford was one. David Linloff, 2, Rebecca Ferguson, 3, somebody else too, I can't quite remember who it was at this time. As far as Preble County officials go, those 3 knew without a doubt what the plan was.
Them 3 knew that your testimony was going to be fabricated?
Yes. Because it was them that supplied me with the pictures and information that I needed in order to fabricate the story in the way I did.
So you're saying that Mary Buckley, Becky Ferguson, Frank Ford, and Dave Linlaw was in on the plan for you to testify falsely in court?
Right. And Judy knew about it, but Judy was really the mastermind of the whole thing. She pretty much was the person that was convincing everybody else that we could pull this off. And Buckley, of course, who was convinced that David had gotten off with killing her daughter.
Or you mean Billy?
Yeah, I keep saying David because I've talked to David recently, and I've talked to him a lot more so than I have
David
Billy.
Scott?
Yes.
Okay.
He keeps contacting me, and him and Moody, John Moody. They want me to, and they pretty much, were the reasons I came back there the first time. And because as I've gotten older, I've gone through many court battles myself. Some where I was innocent, and some where I was not so innocent. And I've tested our justice system. I've been to 5 or 6 trials. And it's not the justice system that's fucked up, really. I found that the justice system, if you push it to the limit, it will work. It does work, even in the accused's favor.
Tony, are you related to the Stoners?
Not by blood, but
Because we kept hearing that Rick was like your uncle or something.
Rick was very close to me.
And you considered him an uncle or something?
Well, I named my first son after him.
Okay. So you were just good friends with him, and you considered him like an uncle?
Yeah, and Rick's brother, David, was my mom's boyfriend as I grew up. They were all, those guys were all affiliated with some of the outlaws and the horsemen.
Did you know Pete Rubush, too?
Yeah, I knew
Because your mom lived there in New Hope, didn't she?
Yeah.
Right there at the edge of New Hope?
Yeah.
I remember when she lived there.
Yeah, and I knew Pete and his son, and Pete.
Did you live there in New Hope, too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just briefly, and whenever I was in there, I was in and out.
So you're saying your motivation, I guess Mary's motivation is because she thought Billy did it, so she wanted Billy to, you to be a witness to help convict him because she felt he did it in her heart. Right. And your motivation was because he got off on killing Rick Stoner,
exactly,
that you wanted him to pay for that.
Exactly.
That's what I understand.
That was our way. We both wanted the same thing in common, only for the wrong reasons. Because the more I've thought about it over the years, the more it bothers me that, especially being one that, I've stood in front of a jury and been guilty of something, and I've had that jury come back not guilty. And I've also been stood in front of a jury or a judge, where I was accused of something that I wasn't guilty of doing, and they believed it, and it's the worst thing, really. It's when you're being accused of something that you know you didn't do. You feel like your unsurmountable opponent has you beat by just sheer, power.
Now, when I read the police report, it shows that Frank Ford came to talk to you around New Paris or somewhere, and you took off running on foot because you had them warrants.
Right.
And then your girlfriend at the time helped Frank get you to come in.
Yeah.
Was that part of a setup? What was the deal there?
Because I wasn't quite aware that Frank was going to be the contact guy, the guy that was initially going to contact me and say that he had heard that I had information, and they were trying to keep it on a legitimate level of professionalism. I wasn't supposed to have really any contact with Frank, and they never gave me his name or who it was going to be. I knew I had warrants, and they just said that somebody was going to contact me and that I would know who it was. And
who told you that?
That's what Judy told me, and Mary Buckley pretty much. She told me in front of Mary, so I guess it was kind of. I knew that was how it was going to go down. I knew that a cop was going to approach me, and how I read it, and I had previously known Linloff, but I didn't know. I didn't know that he was involved in it until a little bit later on.
Had you ever talked to Dave Linloff about this case?
Oh yeah.
Billy Scott case.
But not so much on the record, or not so much. I honestly wouldn't have pegged him as an insider until later on.
What was that conversation? You said
it was because he was the one that first initially tried to contact me to find me. He was leaving his cards everywhere I would fucking show up at, that people would say, "Hey man, Linloff was here, he left a card." And I always remember his business card. I had a little set of eyes on it that said, "I'm been looking for you," and so it was kind of intimidating in that manner, to where I felt like, I guess I viewed him as not a part of the team until later on.
So the trial on Rick Stoner and Pete Rubush and Jimmy Ferguson was over. You were ticked off at the results.
We were very upset.
And so then you made up this fabricated story after the trial?
The fabrication of this story never came along until after the results of that trial. Because honestly, I think because Judy kept telling all of the boys basically, let justice do its thing.
Right.
And justice did its thing, and I mean, they were going to fucking kill him, without a doubt. And I've thought about that over the years because
somebody was going to kill Guy Billy Scott. You mean?
I knew those guys like friends, like really close friends. I mean, even for as young as I was, I dealt with them on a pretty high level for a long time before all this happened, and I was literally on that street, when the shots were fired, and then to find out what had happened, and then trying to piece it together from there, it was really kind of fucked up because. Basically started, the whole thing initiated was from a young girl who said she had been approached by Billy and was talked to inappropriately or whatever.
Is that true?
We found later on, and this is coming from a conversation I had with Billy, that Amanda, the child, was, I don't know, roughly 12, 13, 14, but was pretty promiscuous anyway at that age. And
what was Amanda's last name?
I want to say Owens.
Have you talked to Billy Scott?
I have talked to Billy. Well, I haven't talked to Billy Scott since the trial, no. I've talked to David several times, John Moody, several of their representatives, because they've been trying. I made contact at first on a online forum back there, and at first they didn't believe me, when I told them who I was. But it's been bothering me since Judy died and Bud died. People were dying. I mean, and it seemed like a long time had passed. The more I got experienced in because I went on to do a lot of things as far as maybe the criminal life goes, and I was able to, I always had this attitude about how the justice system kind of works for whoever fucking pays it.
So you're saying that you weren't at that party at all that night?
I was never at the party, no.
Somebody had said that your sister Lori was there, but you weren't there. Is that true?
No.
She wasn't there either?
No.
Okay. So the story about seeing them with fireworks there?
No.
You didn't see that?
No.
Getting into electric fence when you climbed over the fence, that didn't happen?
No.
What happened with the polygraph that you passed?
That was Frank Ford. It was Judy and Frank basically collaborating. They came up with a plan and Judy I talked with extensively about it, but Frank is the one that actually gave me the medication. I forget exactly what the medication was. I just remember him right on the way he drove me to Columbus himself.
So you took that at BCI?
Yeah, and he gave me the medication. We stopped for Burger King for lunch, and I remember taking the medication just shortly before we went in there. And he just kept reassuring me that as long as I kept an open mind and thought about something completely irrelevant to the case and thought about it consistently, that I would be golden. He said it'd be fine, absolutely fine, because it was based on nerves and such and such, and that he could.
So you didn't see Lisa laying on the ground and Guy Billy Scott?
I was never at the party. I honestly don't know that I've ever. My sister was friends with Lisa. My sister's name was also Lisa, but I remember her talking about her in high school. But I don't believe that I've ever actually met Lisa Buckley. I couldn't even tell you really what she looked like until after I'd seen pictures and stuff that Frank had showed me. Not only that, I mean, Frank actually took me out to the lake and showed me things that.
Frank showed you how things were set up, so you know how to tell him what happened.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Anybody else participate in that, Larry
His first
Swihart?
visit was
What about Larry Swihart? Because he questioned you too.
right. Larry Swihart. I think to them they felt safe with Larry Swihart because Larry didn't come on to the case until a little bit after the fact.
Okay.
And by the time Larry had come on, I was pretty well versed in the story that I had come up with.
So you think Larry Swihart thought your story was legitimate?
Exactly.
So Larry wasn't in on the plan.
Right. Larry, I think Larry might have had suspicions of that because of the fact that just for the simple fact that he wasn't available for the time when Frank picked me up and took me out to the actual scene of the crime.
So Larry never went out there.
Right. At least not with anybody. I mean, my first initial visit to that crime scene was me and Frank Ford alone.
Did you ever go out there with Larry and Frank?
I did, but it was later on. I think also with Dave Linloff.
So how did you know? How do you know that Becky Ferguson knew that your testimony was fabricated?
How did I know that?
Mm-hmm.
You know what? In all honesty, and which I'm trying to do right now is, in all honesty, I would have to say that I was more or less speculating that, and it had more to do with the fact that the conversations that her and I had right during the trial in the motel room, some late night visits. To her hotel room, and
where was this hotel? She had you meet her at a
Hamilton,
hotel?
Ohio, yeah.
What was that for?
I'm not exactly sure what it was for, other than the fact that they wanted to be able to keep in close proximity to me during the trial.
Were you staying at the hotel and she come visit you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
They had put you up at a hotel
because
this trial was in Hamilton, correct?
Right.
Because
It was Frank Ford that actually came down. I was living in Kentucky at the time. I was a little skeptical, because some people were saying, well, the Scots, as soon as they find out that you're fucking, what's going on here, they're gonna fucking want to kill you. I was mainly coming. Of course, my mom was concerned, and she really didn't know much, but she could tell what was going on as it was unfolding, and she just kind of was like hoping that it went through and didn't blow up in her face, and because it was pretty nerve-wracking when the trial time, the day it came up, and it was really time to get down to business and fucking and go in here and convince the world that Billy Scott did something that he didn't do.
Now, how did you know that Dave Linloff? I mean, you said Frank was in on it, but how did you know that Dave Linloff was in on it too?
Well, mainly because of the visit that him and Frank and I had back to the crime scene. Because there were several things that we didn't go over the first time, Frank and I, that Dave was pretty thorough with everything. He made sure details that I knew. And even more so, I recall he had some pictures available of the party that he let me view during the walk around of the lake, which gave me almost the idea of being there.
So you're saying Dave Linloff showed you things that he wanted you to testify about? Right.
Well, he was giving me information on the party. He wanted to, more than anything, he kept wanting me to try to, he kept showing me these pictures, wanting me to try to pick somebody out of that lineup, somebody in the pictures that would know me, somebody that would, that could testify that they see me there, or that, if you look back on it, there's not one person at that party that will ever say that they see me there. That was one of my biggest concerns. It never came up, of course, because I think our prosecutor was in the idea, she was able to direct things away from that general direction of questioning in the courtroom. And I still remember Billy standing up in that courtroom and fucking just fired up, mad, fucking, and he looked right at me and he said, I did not kill Lisa Buckley. He was looking me right in the eyes, and I kind of salivated in it because that's ultimately what I wanted to see from him, was the fucking, I wanted to see him going down. I wanted to see him knowing that he was going down for something that he didn't do. And I almost just wanted to shake my head at him and tell him, I know you didn't do it, but you did kill my friends, and for that you're gonna burn in hell, basically, kind of thing. And
Tony, do you remember when? And I know it's been 20-some years ago, but do you have any clue of from the time of the shooting to the trial that Billy Scott went through on the shooting? When did these meetings that you say you had and stuff, when did all this stuff occur? Do you have any recollection of that?
Well, it occurred in because Lisa Buckley's murder had been unsolved for some time before that. And because I think Billy's name was mentioned during that investigation and then it was released, I think just the simple mentioning of that gave Mary Buckley something to cling to. And the minute that Judy Stoner and Mary Buckley had set their sights on him as the one, there was going to be no stopping them. Somebody was either going to kill David or Billy, and that's more or less the way Mary was satisfied. Mary would have been satisfied with him being killed, especially if it didn't cost her anymore. But Judy wasn't so keen with the idea because she didn't like the idea of one of her sons, losing the rest of his freedom or being in trouble or something over killing. So this silly. Because we had somebody in place that was gonna that was gonna to terminate Billy at some point during that process. And that person was a family member that was willing to do it. We just didn't want it to come to that. We didn't feel like we wanted to lose another family member to that.
So this was after the trial where he was found not guilty. Right.
Well, see, that's pretty much that's when
all this,
when POMC evolved into this group, and they started holding meetings. Mm-hmm. That's when things started to really materialize, because you got Judy Stoner and you got Mary Buckley. Mary Buckley was they were pretty prominent. They had some pull around the courthouse, so to speak, and Judy as well had worked in the courthouse for some time.
She was in maintenance.
Yeah, and she had some people in the courthouse that were kind of on her side, and she had manipulating power that she definitely used when the time was right. She used it.
When you went in and when you fabricated this thing and this all came out, how long after he was found not guilty on Rick did you come in and start talking to him, or you recall that?
I recall that because they were immediately trying to kill him. The plans went into motion from
after he was found not guilty.
No, after the initial murder, okay. Especially when the brutality with Pete. Because Pete, I believe, didn't die from a gunshot wound. He died from blunt trauma to the head. And Pete's son, and there were so many other people. There was people that just wanted him to pay. And Mary Buckley, like I said, at that point would have been completely satisfied with a downright fucking hit. Just somebody to just take him out. she just wanted to know that he was no longer on the same planet that she was.
But your motivation, you said, was after Rick got killed.
Yeah.
Because he was like your uncle. That's when you got involved in this, right? How long after that trial do you recall that you went and started working?
We went right to work, pretty much.
After that trial?
Right. Even before that trial, they were trying to pull shit. I mean, everybody was kind of jockeying for position, but I've never been a part of something to where so many people wanted one person dead, and would really stop at nothing to get it. That's why when the idea was introduced,
your anger to get involved was after the shooting.
Yeah, well, Rick was a very good friend of mine, and an impact on me as a child, and I grew up with him, man. I mean, every day, every night, and he accepted me, and there were times when, I used to run around and fucking rip off everybody and their brother over there. So
did you stay with Stone or something?
I did stay with him for quite a while, and I sold him a lot of guns. It got to the point where it blew into a really big thing, because all over Dark County and Preble County alone, I was bringing in thousands and thousands of guns, on a pretty good basis.
Tony, have you ever talked to anyone from the Ohio Innocence Project?
I have, not until recent years, long after everything had been falling into place, because my job was just to disappear after that. Once he was convicted, to just disappear, stay low, and not talk to anyone about it. And literally, I just left it in my past and moved away. I didn't necessarily change my lifestyle, but...
How long ago did you talk to them?
I've talked to, within the last few years, I've talked to Jim Ferguson.
I'm talking about the Ohio Innocence Project.
Oh, I talked to them. The federal case that I beat here back in 2010. When I was released, I opted to get the hell out of town for a minute, because
was that a counterfeiting or something?
Counterfeiting and weapons. Yeah, they were trying to get me for something, but I felt pretty damn lucky when I came out of that one. So I just decided, I wanted to let people know.
Do you know who killed Lisa Buckley?
I have a pretty good idea.
Who do you think it was?
Lisa Buckley. The only reason I know this is because during that time of that party, I actually lived outside of a friend of mine's house in New Paris. His name was Rodney Knox, and
that's who you suspect?
No, Rodney. Rodney had a friend of his that I recently met.
Rodney's the one supposedly told you where the party was, right?
Right, and Rodney was a really good friend of mine, but there was a guy that lived out front of Rodney's house. They had a van there, and he actually was from Big Pine Keys, the same place that Billy and David had came from.
A white van?
Yeah, and him and I became friends to a certain degree, and we hung out. We did a lot of things, and he told me a lot, and I pick up on people, and I could tell there was something pretty dark about him, especially with the ladies. I never really had any trouble.
You don't know his name?
Yeah, I know his name.
What's his name?
His name's Jason Weaver.
Do you know where he lives now?
I couldn't begin to tell you. I've looked on Facebook. I've looked everywhere. I've not been able to positively ID where Weaver went.
Why do you suspect him?
Weaver told me that he didn't go to the party that he was supposed to go, and he didn't go to the party. He then disappeared pretty much into thin air. And then when I was I was in the courtroom in the Hamilton County when I actually seen the picture that was taken at the party that night that had Jason Weaver in it.
Oh, he was in the picture at the party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't say anything. At that point, obviously, I'm in front of a whole world of crowd, and it affected me pretty greatly because I knew how Jason was with women, and I had heard about an incident that ultimately led to him leaving Florida. A similar incident where a woman was attacked, and I just kind of blew it off as just people talking, but obviously at that point it kind of came into a surreal.
You said you talked to David Scott? When's the last time you talked to him?
He attempts to talk to me quite often, but on Facebook. But I don't get on Facebook very often. Usually, every time I get on Facebook, I have something on there from him, And him and I, we've had a few words over the years because I went back there and tried to do the right thing once. And I don't know, I'm not accusing anybody, but somebody dropped the ball on it and it didn't happen. So here we are 5 years down the line, and he's still not out. And
who did you talk to before that you went back to?
What do you mean?
You said you went back there and talked to someone. Who was that?
Yeah, I went back and talked to an investigator for OIP. I don't recall what his name was. He wanted to know what I was saying, and so I pretty much told him. I told him exactly what I told you guys. And
anything else you can think of?
Not really particularly. Nothing of any major importance other than when it eventually I knew that it was deep down I knew that eventually something was going to happen, because obviously over the years I realized because the Scots came off with the Billy and the Innocence Billy project, where they were trying to get him free Billy Scott and this and that. And I'd run across something like that on the internet. Somebody told me that I was on the internet, and I said no, it couldn't be me or whatever. And I looked on there, and they had some bullshit thing, trying to figure out who Tony Young was, and it pretty much single-handedly just fucking made it look completely fabricated, everything I said. I mean, if I read it today, I still can't believe that it was actually, that it went through like it did. It baffles me. Because, I mean, my story wasn't that ironclad, first of all, and I had not one other real person that could back me up on anything. So yeah, I mean, I was pretty nervous that it wasn't gonna come off. But the closer we got to it, the more I started thinking that, hey, this is gonna work.
Where did Jason Weaver live back then?
He lived in New Paris, right. In Van. He was kind of a Puerto Rican, somewhat. I remember he had Afro type hair, and he was pretty well built. And he'd go underwater in the swimming pool, and he'd come up, and his hair would drip dry like a nigger's hair does, And I don't know what. It just was something about him that just wasn't. He had to have been some kind of other nationality. I'm thinking Puerto Rican or Mexican or something, maybe even black.
So you don't remember where he lived, though?
He lived in New Paris. He was homeless, basically. He lived in his van. Yeah. I don't think he ever had a place that I knew of. Now I do know he originally moved up here from Big Pine Keys with Billy and David. So he was part of it.
So they should know who it is.
They will know who he is. Yes. Now, because if you ask, if you ask anybody in those pictures, they could probably tell you who Jason Weaver was.
But
I was shocked to see him in that picture. That was the first picture out of all the pictures I've reviewed. The one that they hand me on the witness stand one day during the trial had fucking Jason Weaver in it, and without a doubt that he was standing in the background. I could barely see his eyes, and I don't know, I think he was throwing like a sign or something, but there he was, man, and that motherfucker, he clearly lied to me for some reason, and he disappeared.
How did Rodney Knox know him?
I'm not sure how Rodney knew him. I just know that Rodney wasn't real keen on it. He was a little leery of the guy, but Rodney was pretty much, I mean, anybody that had any drugs or something to offer, he would fucking, and all these guys were much older than I was at the time too, so but like I said, I usually had a means of something happening because I was always out. I mean, I could fucking go on and on for days about how many places I hit and took guns out of farmhouses and fucking, I mean, thousands and thousands of guns that I was, and they helped me, actually, Rick and those guys helped me channel that into a lot of money. We were taking them into Kentucky to some old guy that was related to somebody else from Dart County who's no longer with us.
So you said about 5 years ago you went back to Ohio and you talked with an investigator. You can't remember his name from the Innocence Project, correct?
If I heard it.
I don't have a name to give you, but I'm just trying to...
But yeah, right off the top of my head, I don't remember.
Have they ever tried to make contact with you?
Yeah, you know, somebody's hired a private investigator that's come out here, and this guy bugs the shit out of me every time I go to jail. He's here. Every time I go to jail, the last time I went to jail, he was right there. For sure, he was
Which jail was you in?
Spokane County. And then he actually drove at one point. He drove all the way up to Colville because I was getting ready to post bond, and he knew it. And he drove all the way to Colville. And I was going to actually help the guy out. I was going to give him sign an affidavit, but then he wouldn't give me a ride back from Colville to Spokane. I told him to get fucked. And he's like, and he pretty much dropped the ball. He's a youngster, but I think he was afraid of me to a certain extent. I don't think he trusted me in his car or something that much, but he didn't really want to give me a ride. I just wanted to ride back to town, and he said that he had some other business to take care of up there, but he had also told me prior to that he'd never been to Colville. So I was kind of wondering what his extra business might be up there. But
so he claimed he was with the
he had affidavits he was wanting me to take a look at them, read them, sign them.
Did you read them?
Yeah, I didn't sign anything.
Why not?
He wouldn't give me a ride back to Spokane, so I said, fuck him. If he can't do me a favor by giving me a ride, then I'm not going to make him look like he fucking did his job, It's just, it was a spite thing. Immature, but at the time I was irritated that I knew he was going back to Spokane and he wouldn't give me a ride. That was slightly irritating.
So I guess at that point, because he wouldn't give you a ride, you were okay with just blowing him off and
yeah, because he attacked. It's the minute I was booked into jail again down there, he was right back.
Mm-hmm.
This time he had talked to a superior officer and had that officer come to me, tried to try to explain to me that this might be the wise thing to do, and then he really the guy just fucked up all the way around. Obviously, I'm not going to want to talk about this in front of a pod full of people,
right.
Criminals. Had you guys not
see you in the pod,
right. Had you guys not brought me here to talk to me about it, I would have never said anything to you in the jail. When I'm booked in down there, it's nothing personal, but we become.
Yeah, but look, it gives you a chance to talk to some people from Preble County.
Well, yeah.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, no, and I usually like talking to my old buddies in Preble County.
We're just not on that list.
Probably not, at least not. No,
I'm a pretty good guy.
Until now. I know I've met you guys somewhere down the line. I remember him.
I remember being out at your mom's house many times.
Yeah.
When you were a little rascal juvenile causing some issues, she called me out there.
I remember. Yeah, I think I remember that.
She even had.
You were the one that she threatened us with. You were her ace in the hole, pretty much. But and my mom, she's still around. She's out here, but she's been on me about doing something about it. But I think sometimes I wonder if she doesn't just make things worse. Sometimes I don't know. But I love my mom, but she's not.
I remember she had all that stuff in the yard. She's had a lot of yard sales and stuff there too, wasn't she?
Yeah. Yeah, she's
anything we're missing here?
Well, nothing really. Nothing that I can think of. I'm sure there's a few things that probably other issues that would, or things that might help out down the line, but come the right time. I mean, if they're serious about doing this, I would be more than willing to go in there and set the record straight. Although I've been, my mom's told me that Dave is against it. And
who's Dave?
Dave, Rick's brother. He was my stepdad for many years. And we all, we were all bitter about Rick dying the way he did, but at the same time, we knew what kind of person Rick was. And when you get older, you feel you want to try to look at situation like from every perspective. And being through the court battles I've been through, and I've been vindicated by a jury several times, and even by a judge when I've had the odds stacked against me tremendously. And it feels right, it feels good. And I think, honestly, that David is, you can say what you want to about his personality, but I think he deserves to have a child at some point. And I think he deserves to...
Oh, you mean Billy?
Billy. I think he deserves to live whatever's left of his life, and knowing that ultimately maybe he lost a lot of years over it. And I mean, there's no worse beef to go down on than the one he went on. I can only imagine the bullshit that he's gone through over the years because of it. And to tell you the truth, I would probably greatly benefit by it as well. I can't tell you how many times I've fucking seen his face staring back at me in that courtroom, knowing that he didn't do it. When he knew that, because he knew the exact moment when I actually convinced everybody in that courtroom that he was the killer. He knew it because he exploded, and when he did, he looked right at me and he's like, pretty much telling me that even though you're wrong, you're lying about it. You know what he wanted? It was a feeble attempt at letting everybody know that he was not guilty of it, and it pretty much went unheard.
So you were in the courtroom when they announced the verdict?
Yeah, and I was of course, David tried to attack me outside the courtroom, and they rushed me out of there pretty quick, and I brought that up to David last time I was talking to him. He wondered why I always evade him, but David's the one that he's really fucking vocal, and he's just obnoxious, and he's also the one that kicked the shit out of Pete when Pete was down. David was the one that was always overboard, and
we're we're going to take a couple minutes, and we're going to leave you right here. We'll have somebody, and we'll come back in here just a couple minutes. We want to make sure that we've covered everything with you, okay? Is that all right? You need anything?
Maybe just another shot of water in here.
Another shot of water? Okay. Hang tight there, okay?
How you doing there, partner? Need some water?
Yeah, if I could, just a shot of water.
Yeah. Mr. Young, you doing okay?
Yeah, I'm alright.
Alright.
Thanks.
What you do? Just the talking and stuff out. If you need any water. Yep.
Yeah, pretty much English shows eventually going to come good.
I know very little about it, you know. But
That's what's overdue, so might as well handle it the best way I can. You know, it's just
trouble for you? Or
it's not really trouble for me. It's actually a vindication for somebody else. And yeah, he deserves it. He's like I said, we punished the guy basically by fucking getting him convicted of a pretty heinous crime that he didn't commit. And he's been 22 years sitting on it, so we felt it was time to
set the record straight.
pretty much, yeah. I mean, it involved a pretty corrupt system, government system with Preble County, and a lot of them are dead now. But I mean, it was no big secret really that shit was covered up, and manipulated, but it flew and costed a man pretty much half his life. So we'll see if we can't get the rest of it back.
What about the the real person that did the
I
crime?
found out during the process. I found out who, just on a fluker. They were showing me pictures of people, and it was just coincidence, but it was a guy that I knew who lived in a bus basically outside a friend of mine's house, and he told me he hadn't gone to the party and he disappeared. And during the trial, they showed me pictures, and there he was.
Is he still alive?
I don't know. I've tried to look him up on Facebook. I got a big ass scar on my arm because of that guy fucking wiping out. We were running from the cops one night.
But you were about, I think they said about 17 at the time or so?
17, 18, yeah. He rolled the car and a tree stump came through the window and just peeled my arm back to my elbow. I managed to get away, but then they all got caught. But he was pretty sinister fucker. He was much older, and he moved up from Florida with these other guys that were ultimately convicted. So, I've never been really one for snitching, but in this case, I don't think it's really snitching. It's just letting somebody off the hook.
Yeah.
It's
doing what's right.
Yeah.
It's doing what's right.
At one time we wanted him to suffer. We wanted him to suffer as bad as he possibly could, but we didn't want to lose any more of our brothers to have that happen. And how much is somebody going to suffer when you blow their brains out?
Yeah. Well, if you haven't realized it, this was the whole purpose of today.
I pretty much knew that.
Wasn't the warrants? And
you guys seen that I had warrants, so that gives it a fucking...
Well, yeah, we knew you had warrants, but this whole thing is what precipitated coming looking for you. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have been looking for you. If we run across you, we would run across you. But
Now you guys got a lot of shit to do.
Yeah, you got an LFO out of Stevens County who gives a shit. That one keeps coming back all the time.
It's pretty much, yeah.
You got it suspended here in this county. I really don't give a shit. I mean, yeah, if I see you somewhere, yeah, I'm probably going to stop you and arrest you, but I'm not going to go out of my way to go looking for you.
Right.
I haven't been over to Britt since last time I was there.
Right.
So.
Well, I got a phone call. I got a phone call, and I was aware that you guys were looking. But I told my girlfriend at the time. Well, she's kind of my girlfriend, not really. I just met her. But Michelle's still my girlfriend, but she's in jail for a while. So
yeah.
I didn't feel like fucking running. I mean, we could have took off again. I knew you guys were coming. Glenn had told me that that there was some vehicles up. You guys had already been there once earlier.
Yeah.
And I get to a certain point where you just don't really want to. I'm not trying to.
Yeah, you're not trying. Yeah. If it comes, it comes.
Right. And I tell you the truth,
you're not going to pick up the phone and call us and say, "Here I am." But
for me, man, I mean, I've been fucking strung out on doing the dope and shit, and I'm trying to fucking just get away from it. And I don't normally fuck with the brown. I've been doing that lately, and I could use a little bit of a break and get my head straight again.
Do you have any issues when you go in, withdrawals or anything like that?
Yeah, a little bit, but for the most part, I'm
not bad.
I just suck it up and take it one day at a time. This chick says she's going to take care of the Stevens County thing. If she does that, I could be out as easy as tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I love Brittany and the kids and all that. She gets pissed off pretty easy.
Well,
she doesn't like Michelle, and she doesn't like me messing with Michelle. And
well, what baby mama doesn't? Though.
Right. And she wants a fucking family, and she wants the tight knit, and I can't give that to her just simply because it's just not feasible. It doesn't feel right to me, so I just try to keep.
There will come a day where it probably will.
Maybe, And Michelle's just fucking hell on wheels. I mean, that girl she's ran me straight fucking ragged. I'm surprised I haven't picked up a really big beef or something already with her. So I'm trying to get away from her, and this is the first chance I've had without her. So, and she's got until May before she gets out. So I met this other chick, and she's never been in trouble with the cops or anything, and she wants to try to go a different direction. And
she looks pretty hard for the wear.
Yeah, I know.
She's hit.
She's been doing brown, I think, for pretty heavy, and she's picking. And, yeah. So I mean, she's. But she's never been in trouble, and she's got the right idea. She has the tools, that it takes to get out of this lifestyle. She has her own home and stuff, so it's just boiled down to whether or not she really wants to deal with that much.
Have to make a choice.
All right. Thanks, sir. Yep. You get your water, Tom?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, I got you more. I guess we run out, you got more.
Thank you.
Back, Tony, just a couple more questions. Back when all this was going on, did you or the Stoners or anybody have any association with any biker groups back then?
Yeah. What do you mean by associations? We were pretty close to quite a few people that were, and a lot of the events that we had were actually, they were put on by, like I said, the Horsemen. They had family members that were, and Lane Hart, LD, Junior. I pretty much grew up with him, Michael Keaton.
So are you saying that was it Rick and David and those guys, they had connections to the Iron Horsemen? Is that what you're saying?
Right, and it was to the point where that they wanted Of course, the organizations that I know that we were in touch with, Rick was a nuisance to them. And they pretty much always said that eventually Rick was going to cause something fucking, something bad to happen. He was always the one that nobody wanted to show up at the party. And he crashed the band equipment and fucking wanted. He was a bully.
Did stupid shit then.
Yeah,
they didn't want anything to do with it. Is that what you're saying?
Right, and even his own family. I mean, Dave, just prior to that Christmas, David pretty much kicked the shit out of Rick, and then, Rick was always the first one on the scene when it came to fucking taxing somebody, though. And when we heard that Billy Owens' daughter had been fucked with by Billy Scott, we didn't care who it was at the time. We were going to go and handle it. What we should have done was find out the facts. Would have been helpful. But Amanda's story pretty much started falling apart directly afterwards. But by that time, things that couldn't be taken back were already in place.
Hey, tell me this: you helped probably send a guy to prison for 20-some years for something he didn't do. What do you think should happen to that person?
Honestly, I think he should get a chance. And no matter how late in life it is,
I'm talking about you. You fabricated a story. And you lied.
And you're talking about me? What should happen?
What should happen to someone that would do that?
Honestly, I'm not real sure. I mean, as far as my own judge and jury, I would have to say the outside influence that I had was definitely the key. And I'm not trying to pass the buck or all, because really, single-handedly, my testimony fucking convicted Billy of the crime. It was powerful enough and believable enough that the people involved were convinced that he did it. And more than anything, because I believe in the justice system. I really do, but that's one case where, and I never could have pulled that off without the corrupt officials, being able to guide me through that. It's not like I had the power to just work it all out myself, but if anything at all, I would want to at least expose how easily it is, for law enforcement officers to have an impact on the truth of the matter, because it takes so little influence from an officer or a judge or a prosecutor, or for that matter, an angry parent, but it boils down to the integrity of the people involved investigating that. And I think...
So if I'm getting this right, you don't think anything should happen to you due to the corruption of the officials that were involved in it?
I don't want to sound like I'm trying. I feel like I was innocent in the whole thing, because, if anything, I would like to at least help raise the awareness to people how important it is to tell the truth in a situation.
You think you should go to prison?
I've been to prison before, and I probably. I don't want to jinx myself, but it's likely that I could see it again at some point, because I know myself, But one thing I've always learned from this, as I've gone on in my life, is the fact that, and when I'm in jail, this last time in jail, I had an experience that gave me a fucking kind of an eye opener. People in positions of power can really dictate whatever they want. The people, institutions, the jails, the officers that have the power to write reports and say whatever it is they want to say, and pretty much are going to they got people standing behind them as well. Those people have to understand how important it is that they're honest about shit like that. Now, I've seen honest people where I was expecting a cop to lie and he didn't. I was like in prison when I assaulted the officer there. It wasn't that I assaulted him. I was defending myself as a person, and I thought I was fucked. But when I came in front of that DOC hearings officer, he had done his research, and he knew something that I didn't know. I was looking at a lot more time, and I was looking at losing any good time. And here this DOC officer came off and told me, we've had this problem with this officer many, many times. And immediately it shocked me that he had realized that, look, this officer's making a habit of doing this to people.
You want to look at this in a perspective that at least I'm looking at this. You're saying that Dave Lindelof was involved in this, Frank Ford was involved in this, Becky Ferguson was involved in this, Mary Buckley was involved in this, Judy Stoner was involved in this. Now, I would maybe one officer being involved, but how do you get all of these people to go along with it at the same time, and no one ever say that how does that stay quiet? How does that, and how do you get that many people to work together on something?
I'll tell you how. It's what it boils down to me is you've got people that are investors, and then you got the people that they'll invest there basically because the prosecutor, and there's a few people that knew that we were going to try this, but the minute it fell apart, they were washing their hands of it. And I think the closer we got to trial, and then when we're actually in that hotel room, I was racking that bill up. I remember them getting the shitty with me about the bill afterwards.
Because I know that if I went to the sheriff and said, "Hey, Sheriff, I'm going to have Tony come in, and I'm going to have him lie for me in court,"
see, it doesn't work
that wouldn't work out for me.
It does not work like that. But if you look back a little bit in history, before all this happened, before this here, and before the murder of Rick and Pete, and Ferg getting shot, then you'll notice there was a couple court cases that Billy had. He was up against Preble County, and a couple different cases where I believe he came out okay, and I think he ruffled a few feathers in the Preble County.
So you're thinking that they made this up to get even with him for him getting...
Ultimately, I believe that, yes, Preble County had a vested interest in putting Billy Scott away. Now, probably rightfully so. Now, by the morals of man, because Billy Scott was he was a fucking punk. I knew him growing up too. This is a guy that traveled around with an axe handle in the back of his truck window, and he bullied people, and he sold drugs, and he was not a model citizen by any means. However, and he was cocky, and when you get like that, and you're cocky towards the people that are trying to prosecute you or trying to bring you to justice, then you tend, especially once you're victorious once or twice over them. I've experienced this myself. You become a little bit more cocky, and you become arrogant, and you can twist. We're all human, and you can twist things a certain way, any way you want. And his dad obviously at one point thought that they had enough money and enough push and that they could fucking railroad through a place like Preble County. And it showed, I think in several occasions where they showed a demonstration of that, and it ruffled feathers. And you get that had to happen to different dialects of people from different backgrounds, and all of a sudden all three of those groups have an opportunity to take part in a hush hush, just kind of let it go and see how far it goes thing. Because I remember it was frustrating for me when I first met with Miss Buckley, because she seemed to be skeptical about it. Or not Miss Buckley, but the prosecutor, Ferguson. She ultimately, I don't think she was probably, if I had to guess, she was probably one of the biggest skeptics during the whole thing. Because she was the one that just she would try to crack me in every different direction. And then finally, I think when she right up to the night before my first testimony, she tried to get me to snap in some way, or to fuck that story up, or to slip up somewhere. And I think that's when she finally realized that, okay, I think this kid's going to be able to go in here. Because she was concerned, obviously, about me just sitting in the courtroom and obviously just blowing everybody out of the water.
So you felt that she had grilled you enough that Becky Ferguson felt that you could get by with the lie in court.
Right. She was. I think at first she was concerned about me turning on them, which is a legitimate concern. Because they ended up ultimately having to come and pretty much drag me into the fucking, they coaxed me down there pretty much, because I had moved to Kentucky. I was dodging them here and there. It was, and in the back of my mind, it's obviously because I'm knowing that I'm lying, right? They're gonna get me in here, and I gotta I'm gonna have to fucking be on my toes every day, because these guys are going to be questioning me, and I'm getting questioned not only from them, but cross-examined by his attorneys, who really, if they would have had their shit together, they could have picked this apart one right after the other. I mean, looking back on it, because I've studied it a little bit over the years, and the fucking just downright blatant, I mean, some of the shit it was totally just off the wall. This did not make sense. It didn't fit together. The pieces weren't right. Honestly, looking back on it, I don't know how it ever got as far as it did. But as far as punishment goes, I mean, I don't want to go to prison, obviously not, and I don't know what the statute of limitations is, but my main intentions here, I think, are to make it right, because there was an innocent man that was convicted of something that he didn't do, and then obviously that leaves out who did do it.
Well, we appreciate you coming.
Yeah, 2 questions. Are you involved in any motorcycle gangs or anything now? I don't know what they have out here.
I've never been affiliated with any gangs since then. Those guys gave me I remember shortly after that I was treated amongst the ranks pretty much as I could fucking, and I still do. I mean, when I went back there, Ferguson still, he got shot in the chest and survived, and he was fucking talking about the bikes that he was going to buy with the payments, and he was one of the ones that really fucked up a lot of shit. But my whole intentions here, if I'd like to see one thing, it would be that I'd like to see Billy on the street with a one chance, even if it is a shorter chance. I'd like to see him with an opportunity to make a life for himself to some degree, and just save whatever's left, and just do the right thing.
One final question, just because we have to ask, but Have you been offered anything by anybody to change the story?
I haven't been offered anything from anybody for any part of the story. Not from OIP or I was on the forums there for a little while, and then most people didn't even believe it was me when I was talking on there. So yeah, that was frustrating. I even got banned from a few that because they thought I was just some heckler trying to start trouble or whatever. But no, the only thing I would like to see come of it is Billy to get his freedom back, and for him to know that obviously I don't necessarily regret. I honestly I would be hard pressed to say that I regret doing what I did when I did it, and would probably have to say that I would do it again in the same situation, only because it felt right at the time. This guy killed somebody that was fucking a hero to me, and he did it in such brutal fashion and I wasn't really counting on the cops to do anything about it, to tell you the truth. But when it all came down and he walked on it, I mean, I know what it's like to have a family or a clan of people that all believe the same thing, and we all wanted him to pay. And for me to be able to get the chance to get that to happen was pretty. It was a good experience to some degree, but over the years it's settled in, and it obviously doesn't settle too well when I think about it. Under all the reality of it is that an innocent man has got a lot of wasted life and time that he may never catch up with.
Okay. We appreciate you talking with us, all right?
Mm-hmm.
It is 8:19, and we are going to end the interview.